Imagine you've held a belief about someone for years, a colleague, a partner, maybe yourself, and one day clear evidence arrives that you were wrong, not slightly mistaken, fundamentally wrong. But instead of updating the belief, you find yourself explaining the evidence away. You tell yourself it was a fluke, an exception, and the original belief stays exactly where it was. That moment is not a failure of intelligence. It is your mind working precisely as it was built to. Most people, when they first hear about confirmation bias, assume it applies to other people. Stubborn people, close-minded people, the kind who refuse to change their minds no matter what you show them. What takes longer to accept is that the bias does not announce itself. It feels, from the inside, like careful thinking, like discernment. There is a reason for that. When you believe something, your brain does not simply store it as a static file. It uses that belief as a template for sorting everything that comes in afterward. Information that matches the template gets flagged as relevant. Information that conflicts gets quietly deprioritized, often before you are even consciously aware of receiving it. This is not laziness. It is efficiency. The mind is doing exactly what evolution built it to do, preserving cognitive resources by reinforcing what already seems to work. What we are going to look at is why that efficiency becomes a trap. And more specifically, why the beliefs most in need of revision are usually the ones the mind defends most fiercely. Picture two groups of people. One believes capital punishment deters crime. The other believes it does not. Both groups are shown the same two studies. One supports deterrence, one challenges it. The methodology of both is explained in equal detail. What Charles Lord, Lee Ross, and Mark Lepper found in their 1979 research was striking. Both groups rated the study, confirming their existing view as more rigorous, more convincing, better designed. The study that challenged them was rated as flawed, possibly biased, not because the studies were actually different in quality. They were designed to be equivalent, but the mind does not evaluate evidence neutrally. It evaluates evidence in relation to what it already believes. What surprises me most about that finding is how educated the participants were. Higher education did not protect against this. If anything, people with stronger analytical skills were sometimes better at generating sophisticated reasons why contradictory evidence didn't count. Peter Wason's earlier work, published in 1960, had already shown that people rarely test hypotheses by trying to disprove them. They look almost exclusively for examples that confirm. His famous 2-4-6 task demonstrated this cleanly. Participants were so committed to testing for confirmation that they failed to discover the actual rule even when the correct answer was within reach. Daniel Kahneman, in Thinking Fast and Slow, published in 2011, placed this tendency inside the broader architecture of what he called System 1 thinking, the fast, automatic, associative mode of cognition that handles most of what we do every day. Confirmation bias, in his framing, is not a bug in this system. It is a feature that occasionally misfires when high-stakes situations demand slower, more deliberate reasoning. The research is one thing, the lived cost is another. Think about someone who believes they are fundamentally unlovable. That belief, once formed, functions like a lens. When someone is kind to them, the mind categorizes it as politeness or pity or a misunderstanding. When someone is cold or distant, the mind categorizes it as proof. The belief does not update. It accumulates evidence on one side only, because the filter was never neutral to begin with. Bessel van der Kolk, in The Body Keeps the Score, published in 2014, described how early relational wounds don't just shape beliefs cognitively. They shape what the nervous system expects, and therefore what it notices. The person who learned early that closeness leads to pain does not consciously choose to misread warmth. The filtering is happening beneath the threshold of deliberate thought. This is where the bias becomes more than an intellectual inconvenience. When the beliefs being protected are about your own worth, your safety, your potential, The cost of the filter is not just being wrong about a policy position. It is building a life around a story that may never have been accurate. Kierkegaard, writing in The Sickness Unto Death in 1849, described a particular kind of despair that comes not from external loss, but from failing to become who you actually are. He could not have named confirmation bias. But the structure he was pointing at, a self that clings to a false version of itself because change feels more threatening than stagnation, is the same architecture. The filter protects the belief shapes the life, and the life quietly confirms the filter. Here is the part that took me the longest to accept. You cannot simply decide to stop being confirmation biased. The research does not support that. Knowing about the bias helps somewhat, but awareness alone rarely dismantles the filter. What actually moves the needle is changing the questions you bring to evidence. Wason's work implies something useful here. Most of us, most of the time, are asking, what supports what I already think? The disconfirmation approach he identified works differently. It asks instead, what would have to be true for me to be wrong, not as a rhetorical device, as a genuine inquiry. That single shift in question structure tends to surface information the original filter was quietly excluding. Lord, Ross, and Lepper found in their follow-up work that asking people to consider the opposite, to seriously imagine that the alternative view was correct, significantly reduced biased evaluation. Not eliminated, reduced. That distinction matters. The goal is not to become a perfectly neutral reasoning machine. It is to introduce enough friction into the process that the filter loosens its grip on the most consequential beliefs. And the most consequential beliefs are usually personal ones. The story about what you are capable of, about whether people can be trusted, about whether effort leads anywhere. Those beliefs feel like observations, they feel like realism. But they are often the oldest, least examined conclusions your mind ever reached, formed with the least information and defended with the most energy. If any of this felt familiar, that is not a reason for shame. It is a signal worth following. The goal is not a perfect mind, it is a slightly more honest one. If that kind of quiet examination of your own thinking is something you want more of, this channel is built for exactly that.